My name is Sasha Prokhorov. I'm the director of Russian Studies program at the College of William and Mary. But you're here not to see me, you're here to see Professor Nina Khrushcheva, Professor of International Affairs at the New School in New York City. She is the Julien Studley Graduate Program of International Affairs at the New School professor. She is the editor and contributor to Project Syndicate, Association of Newspapers around the world. She got her Ph.D. from Princeton University, where she had a 2-year appointment as a research fellow at the School of Historical Studies of the Institute for Advanced Study. And then she served as deputy editor of West European Constitutional Review at the NYU School of Law. She's a member of Council on Foreign Relations, a recipient of Great Immigrants, the Pride of America Award from Carnegie Corporation of New York, 2013, and 2019 Gold Medal of Honorary Patronage from Trinity College, Dublin. Her publications, her articles appeared in Foreign Policy, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and other publications. She is the author of Imagining Nabokov, Russia Between Art and Politics, The Lost Khrushchev, A Journey into the Gulag of the Russian Mind, and she's a co-author of In Putin's Footsteps, Searching for the Soul of an Empire Across Russia's 11 Time Zones. Her books in Russian include Visiting Nabokov and Nikita Khrushchev, An Outlier of the System. This event is sponsored by a Russian and East European Studies program, the Reeves Center for International Studies, Global Research Institute, History Department, and International Relations program. I would like also personally to thank our former colleague, Professor Tonya Nemeny, for helping to bring Professor Khrushcheva to our campus. And let me, before you greet our esteemed guest, explain how the Q&A will work. If you have a question, and you can have as many questions as you want, raise your hand, and one of student assistants, Celeste Edwards and Padraig Messenger, will come to you and give you an index card. Write down legibly, please, your question. We will collect the questions. There will be a lot of questions. And Professor Hansen volunteered to sort through these questions and kind of channel it to Professor Khrushcheva. So if you have an idea for a question during Q&A or before, just raise your hand, and Celeste and Padraig will be watching and give you a card and a pen to write down the question legibly, please. And without further ado, please help me to welcome Professor Nina Khrushcheva.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the long introduction. People don't live that long. So I'm going to do something that probably you haven't seen for some time. In the last 3.5 years since the war began, I've been going to, what? You can hear me? Okay.
It's my fault. Hold on a second. It has nothing to do with our guest. Let's try again. No?
Just use the other mic. Just hand her your mic.
This mic? All right. Sorry.
But it was no? Does it work? Okay, I'll scream. You go ahead.
Okay. You don't like this one?
No, because no, it's operating heavy machinery is not my thing. So what are we okay? Good. So what I'm trying to do or will do today, as I said, since the war began, I've been going to Russia and stayed there for many months. Don't ask me how I made it. I did. And it worked somehow. So I came in and I left, and then I came in and I left. And so I wanted to understand by going there, and also want to share it with you, how does Putin propaganda work? Because what you are hearing or reading in most reports is that it works tremendously well. People support the war, as they call it, the special military operation, in great numbers. Putin's support is 80%, which is probably 60 if we're very honest, and so on. So what I want to do is to show you exactly how it works and how it doesn't. And here, I don't know if you can see very well, so I put, yes, I think without the lights maybe it would be better. So those of you who know Russia wouldn't be anything new that you haven't heard before, but Russia is a very strange country in a sense that it does have a split personality disorder. It's basically functioning through schizophrenia. And one of it, I mean, it's funny, but it's not funny, it's true, because symbols are important, and it's not in vain that Russian symbol or Russian coat of arms is the double-headed eagle. And I actually have a picture on the right. You see this is the Red Square in 2022. I took this picture, but even earlier this, you see there's a communist red star and the double eagle, so they are together. Which country would have two of its coat of arms that actually totally in contradiction with each other? The double eagle is the traditional symbol that the Russians took in from Byzantine Empire, and of course the communist red star is the communist red star. So it's a country of 5,600 miles across 11 time zones. So imagine this size. It's the largest country on Earth. So it is very difficult to comprehend it the way it's being reported as black and white and whatnot. So this is important, and you'll see it in my presentation. Because it is schizophrenic, it has this tradition of double think and double speak. So people say what they say, but it doesn't mean that they think what they say. And that's also important to understand. Then one of the successes, or something that is presented as success, is that the propaganda is everywhere. It is indeed true. So it's kind of this onslaught of TV, billboards, social media events, education. Those who follow Russia just, I'm sure, have seen that Eurovision, that Russia was kicked out from after 2022, now has resurrected the Soviet thing called the Intervision, and so tried to present it as the Eurovision opposition. And one of the most amazing things about the kind of Russian schizophrenia and Russian presentation of itself, that a lot of it is a Potemkin village. Once again, Potemkin village is when kind of the appearance of things are put together instead of the actual thing. So at the end, the singer from Vietnam took the first prize, and as it turns out, this young gentleman is a gay man. And this is in a country that forbids LGBTQ, and it's actually announced or renounced the existence of LGBTQ as a terrorist organization. So apparently all LGBT is a terrorist organization. I'm laughing, it's not funny, but that's how the Potemkin village works. So you actually have a fake contest, and then because it is a fake contest, ultimately you don't get the results that you want to get. What else? Despite the sanctions in 22, mass sanctions, giant sanctions, I think Europe is now preparing its 20th packet of sanctions. Nothing in Russia ever works as it is supposed to. And that sanctions didn't work either, which is amazing, actually. But that's the whole point, that Russia is a very hypothetical culture, is that all these rational things that are being imposed on it don't work. precisely because it's a Potemkin village, and so the economy, at least thus far, has been doing quite well, and because it was doing quite well, the war could argue that the war is okay and will work out. Then when countries are in crisis, and not just Russia, of course you have nostalgia for things that are normal, and especially when you don't remember how they were. I mean, I lived in the Soviet Union, so I remember that it wasn't normal, but many people do not remember that it was normal. They're younger, or people who are my age and older, they now forgot how not normal it is. It's like, oh no, that was great, there was order in the streets, and all things were wonderful. So nostalgia is a very big part of kind of the efforts of the Kremlin. So these are kind of, I'm outlining the foundations of the Kremlin propaganda. Then, so how it works. If it were just allowed to exist, maybe there would be no influence. But then there is an expectation of everybody to follow the patriotic behavior. And if you are not following the patriotic behavior, then you're going to have punishment, potentially punishment. And so people, when they say 80% support Putin, like, what are you going to say? What, I don't like Putin? Of course you're going to say you support Putin. And in fact, those who say they don't support Putin, I find it very brave, but they do. Then, of course, and we see it in America, we once again see it everywhere, there are divisions. So if you say, if you are with, I mean, if you are not with us, then you're against us, and therefore you're not patriotic. So that works for some people. You are supposed to display militancy and strength because the macho man act like this, and now actually it is a global, we see there is a global fashion for macho man. I mean, we start with Trump, who's a fake macho man, but once again, he does that. But so there is a lot of macho manliness. I mean, Vladimir Zelensky wears his military outfit. Emmanuel Macron, who is a very sharp dresser, if you may remember, after the beginning of war, suddenly he started dressing like Vladimir Zelensky, which was absolutely insane when you see Macron in military boots and T-shirt, Macron in a T-shirt. So it's a kind of a trend, but when the country is at war, even if it is special military operation, you can imagine that also should work. Then, of course, anybody who disagrees can become, and that's important, can become a target. Of course, people have to agree or pretend that they agree because there's fear of punishment, retribution, prison, and whatnot. And so my last, and I can do much longer than that, but I just put this as yet, so that special military operation, actually something that when Putin announced it, he wanted it to become, it was supposed to be quick, so people are not going to protest. Those who protest are imprisoned immediately, but generally for the much of the population, it's going to be short-lived, victories immediate, and your life is not going to be interrupted. So you should agree with that, only not protest. So people sort of settled for that a bit, and of course those who protested immediately went to either prison or were kicked out, and so on. But then you see the war has gone on, three and a half years. And because people were allowed to live normal lives, it never became a national cause. And so Putin is fighting the war somewhere, and the normal life is somewhere else. And that is a very interesting moment, and I think it's a breaking moment. It's either the war, special military operation is either going to end or it's going to turn into bigger war. We don't know yet. But the war has never become national. And that's something that I think is really now has begun bothering Putin very much, because he's fighting an existential cause with the West, because Ukraine became, as he put it, the platform for attacking Russia, and most of the population is not really interested in that. And another one is, of course, when kind of you pretend that you agree, but you don't necessarily agree, so it's the exception and apathy, and kind of people try to live as much normal life as they can. as long as they don't rock the boat. So I thought that was important to kind of set up what I'm going to talk about, because I'm going to talk about successes and failures, and my failures are as yet, sorry. The pictures here, I took all these pictures myself over this 3.5 years, so as I said, the split personality, the national schizophrenia right there. And this was in Tarjok, is a small city in the Tver region where they do gold embroidery. And it's very beautiful. And somewhere there, this is sort of this mural on private home painted by the owner of this building with a Z, and you see, so this is 23. I'm sure it was painted in 22. The Z is the sign, as I put it here, the Z is a sign for support of the war in Ukraine, and the dragon is Uncle Sam. You know, who else it's going to be? It's not even Ukraine, but it is Uncle Sam. And so when I was taking a picture of this, the owner came out of this building, and he was drunk to the point of not standing. And he said, "Am I cool?" And he said cool in English. I'm like, yeah, that works, clearly. If you speak Russian, "Разве я не cool?" And like, awesome. And so that's also incredibly schizophrenic, because you are painting something which is deeply patriotic, and you're wanting me to admire this, but you're speaking to me in half English. And so that has been my experience all through all these years. So I will try to kind of show what was then at the beginning of the war, when the country was in absolute shock that it happened. Nobody believed it would last for a long time. And despite all the declarations that Russia is going to turn against the West, so this is I think, May 22. All the declarations that Russia is going away from Western formulas. You get to St. Petersburg, and that's what you see. Johnny Depp, Angelina Jolie, and so on. This is 25 on the right. This is already Moscow. So we have Depardieu, who is, as you know, I think, he was either a Russian citizen and still being a Russian citizen, or he's still a Russian citizen and had some vineyards in Crimea, I forgot something. And Schwarzenegger, who is, of course, spoke against the war, but he's German-speaking. Putin loves him. He's a bodybuilder. Putin is a bodybuilder, so they're kind of safe. But most of the paintings are no longer of Western actors, not because people don't want to, but I talked to this person who is sitting there, and I asked him, so who are your subjects now? And he said, well, you know, I obviously would like to paint not those losers, but I can't, because if somebody would pass by and then report on me and say that I am supporting the Western formula. So this whole double speak happens all the time. Once again, 22, 25. So you see Putin on the left, Pushkin, Lenin, Peter the Great further, Stalin. And that's also, then 22 was the first year when Stalin became more and more visible in public spaces, because until 22, you wouldn't find that much. In fact, in Minsk, in Belarus, you would find Stalin because they never denounced anything Soviet, but until 22, Stalin was not public. This is very new. I took the minute I arrived in Moscow, I took a trip to the Taganka station and to see the new Stalin plaster wall, and there was a lot of conversation about this, that it's made of plaster, and before it was granite and marble. And because it's plaster, it's not going to last long. It doesn't matter. The image is there, and that's important. You see there is Gagarin and Stalin and all of this. This is my favorite. I bought this chocolate in 22, which says, "We don't leave ours behind." So this is a chocolate you kind of display. So Putin doesn't leave ours behind. With the Stalin wall, it is interesting. This woman in white in white outfit. She looks as if she just came out of the 50s. I mean, it's kind of amazing. She's probably my age, maybe a little older, but she does look as if she just got out of 1953. Stalin dies and she's crying her eyes out. I was there for about half an hour to see how people react, and she was there. When I got there, she was already there, and when I left, she was still there. So she was really praying and praising her God that finally appeared in public spaces. But most of the time, you see there's a little carnations with like very kind of not great, and people mostly taking selfies. Not there is much going on. So the lip service to Stalin is important. Some actions that Stalin, we have to follow because it was a strong country, the war was won, and whatnot. But generally, kind of Stalin is separate, and the rest of everything else is separate. This is my favorite. Because Russia now lives in George Orwell. Nobody has ever lived in George Orwell. As we remember, George Orwell, when he wrote his novel in 49, he never lived in a dictatorship. There was sort of a combination of the Soviet and Hitler formulas, but he didn't know what it is. I mean, Russia now is absolutely George Orwell. The psychotic decrees that are being published and pushed out, the double think, the double speak, the Ministry of Peace, because there is no such thing as Ministry of War. Actually, in America there is a Ministry of War, but in Russia it's a Ministry of Peace. Then, of course, the Ministry of Love, which tortures and puts people in prison and make them foreign agents. But it's a Ministry of Love. And Big Brother is all over you, and so on. So it is quite fascinating, actually, kind of to witness all this, but also fascinating to see that, so this is 23, 1984, right in the center, and people walk with this bag all the time. So 1984 in the middle, this is kind of the center of display. And when I was buying Novaya Gazeta, those of you who know Russian, there's new Novaya Gazeta. It's kind of not published, but it is published. It's the newspaper that Dmitry Muratov, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, was an editor-in-chief until he had to give it up because he's a foreign agent. So I talked to the woman who was selling it to me, and I said, "You have a really interesting display here." And she said, "Well, of course, we have to remember what country we live in." So for her, 1984 was, we have to remember what country we live in. And so here you see, this is in Moscow in another store. So on top there is 1984, and there is here in 1984. But this is 23-24. So you come in 25, and you think it's over, because people would think that there is no more Orwell. You cannot have Orwell anymore. Fun fact, 1984 is the second most stolen book from libraries and bookstores. Even more fun fact, that the first most stolen book in libraries and bookstores is the Constitution of Russian Federation. That is amazing, and the reason it is amazing is because people they look at the Constitution. This is your beautiful dystopia, because in the Constitution, all wonderful things you can do, but you can't do them in 1984, which is the second sold book. So this is also the, oops, sorry. Okay, I just want to show you, because I took it with my own little hands. Okay, so Auchan, this is a Russian Walmart, and the reason it's important because it is a Russian Walmart. You have 3 versions, actually there was 4 versions, but another one was far away, so I didn't do the picture. So there is 4 versions of Walmart, of Russian 84. So which means that people are actually buying this book, or stealing this book for that matter. Okay, So this is not far where I live in Moscow, and this is sort of the same Respublika bookstore I mentioned before. So this is 25, and so by 25 things change. Remember the picture when there are books and books and books? So now most books are moved to the second floor, because who knows who is going to come and check whether you have LGBT literature or you have foreign agent literature or Orwell for that matter. So all the books are moved up. What you have is on the lower shelf, on the lower picture, what you have is you have candles. Come in and live a wonderful life in a bookstore. Hide away from Putinism in a bookstore. There is no Putin. Before 22, there was a lot of calendars with Putin, and I actually used to buy. I was a big fan of Russian propaganda when it wasn't that dangerous and not that real, for that matter. There is no Putin. If you're in this bookstore, you wouldn't know that there is a special military operation. You wouldn't know there is Putin altogether. You have fun products. Once again, you continue to have 1984. But what's also amazing, you see this Be Smart, there's other places that says Candles in English. And this is all around the time when this summer Putin signed a law that you're not supposed to you're only supposed to have Cyrillic in your advertisement. So all of this is all in English. Just, you know what? Who cares? And I was meeting with a woman there who, because Russia just did a happiness index, which is, for those of you who know Russia, happiness index is not what we do ever, or happiness for that matter. I mean, those who study Russian literature know that firsthand. But Russians are happy. Oh my God, Russians are happy. And so I found through Novaya Gazeta, I found a woman, young woman, 23 years old, and who participated in that survey, and I met with her here, and we had wonderful coffee. There was a very hip drink that she was drinking called Bumble. In Russian, it's Shmel, but of course it's called Bumble. Nobody's going to call Shmel anything. And so she said, well, I'm drinking Bumble, and we don't care that Putin just signed that law. And actually, I thought it was quite disgusting. It's orange juice with espresso. Whatever. Apparently very fashionable in Berlin. So once again, those are traditional things that Russia is looking for or looking at, not happening. So she was drinking Bumble, and so I asked her if she was happy. And she said, yeah, I am happy. And I'm like, oh, how could you possibly be happy? And she said, look, I'm 23. I went to protests when I was 20 when the war began. I cried for months. I didn't know what to do. Life seemed over, and now it's not over, and all these geriatrics in power, we're going to live through them, and we're going to outlive them, and it's going to be another thaw, which is the Khrushchev era in Soviet history, and there's going to be another perestroika with, as it was with Gorbachev in the late 80s. I thought it was a little optimistic, but it was interesting, the 23-year-old, and they're brainwashed. Only the school children are more brainwashed than those young ones. So all of this sort of contradicts the fact that Russia is all supporting, it's all great, and so on. You tell me that I'm showing Moscow and St. Petersburg, but don't fret. I visited other places, and in many places that's absolutely the same experience that I had. So this is 23. 23 was a big year because 23 was, the war began, and 22 nobody believed it was happening. By 23, and so you see this was sort of the height of propaganda displays. And a lot of them, the Army Forum, the USSR, the Soviet Union, something or other, which was also interesting because until 22, 23 was like with Stalin. USSR, or the story of US sort of was present here and there, but not in such promotional materials. Of course, the church, because as you know, church and USSR, they go together really, really well. Essentially the same belief system. Then we preserve our heritage, and of course this God, I'm sorry, I'm laughing because it's so psychotic seeing it all together. So this is 23, and by now it's stopped. So that was the height of propaganda, and then it sort of started going down. They needed it, they expected it to become something grand, and then it started going down. So this is also 23. I love this. So Barbie comes out, Oppenheimer comes out. The state moves in to forbid them, both films. I don't know why Oppenheimer, actually. I think because it was Barbieheimer, and so they decided Oppenheimer should not be shown as well. So they forbid to show because it stands against the values, traditional values, whatever that means. I think pink, potentially. A non-traditional value, for that matter. So this is in food court where next to me. So you see the Ken and Barbie, and they're actually selling something car-related. This is Barbie in a food court called Depot. This is Nevsky Prospect, which is even more amazing because Nevsky is the main street of St. Petersburg. So you see Barbie poster. It's forbidden, but you see Barbie poster right there, an Oppenheimer poster and whatnot. And I was actually talking to people who were coming out of the theater, a young couple, they saw Oppenheimer, and I said, so how is it possible? It's like, oh, these shadow seances are everywhere. I mean, nobody cares. Potentially the movie theater will have problems, but probably not. And so all of this that's why I started my conversation about double think and double speak, and how basically the state, by not moving into the full-time war, thinking it's not going to be a full-time war, actually shot itself in the foot because it allowed all this parallel things that are completely unrelated, the war and normal life, global life, to function together. Do I still have time? Am I too long? So this is very quickly. This is in Tver region, and so from 22, a lot of museums got a kind of not official, but recommendation to have exhibits connected to the Soviet life or Russian imperial life. And so this is in Tver, and these are very beautiful little statues that are kind of the remake of what Nicholas II, before he was, before the Bolshevik Revolution in 17, he ordered it for the anniversary of the Romanovs. So he did this. And this is called the Nations of Russia, the Cultural Code of the Nation. This is when Putin spoke about the cultural code. So this is kind of an interesting form of propaganda, because in this exhibit, there is, I forgot how many, but about 400 pieces. Armenians are there, Georgians are there, Jews are there, Ukrainians are there. At the time they were Malorussia, small Russians, and so on. So if you come into this exhibit and you don't know that much history, you don't pay attention, you actually think, oh my God, look at us, we all have that. So all of these other countries that are countries, like Georgia or Armenia, it appears that they're not countries. And I had a conversation with a visitor who said, well, we used to own it all. And now all this kind of random people became countries, and somebody else came in and said, well, but now they have the country. So it was interesting to witness the debate between those who visit this exhibit. And so this is kind of an interesting thing. So this is one part. This is a propaganda part. But another part of that propaganda is that museums also fight that. And so they're special art spaces where people, like in that bookstore, Respublika, that I spoke about, people just go there for the whole day. And there is no Putin, there is no war. All of this is designed before 22, so it's very normally kind of Western design or whatever, global design. And so people spend time there. This is from the Center of Tolerance, which of course in Russia now it's almost a curse word, tolerance, the Jewish Museum. And there's a lot of religious activists who say, well, women need to go back to the traditional values, need to go back to the kitchen and they have to stand behind the man. Sort of something that being a Soviet person, is shocking to me because, of course, in the Soviet Union, the equality of sexes and whatnot, no more. So what do? They did an exhibit of film directors, women film directors, and one of them, once again, those who know Russia, one of them is Lioznova, who in 1973, she did a 10-part series, or 10-part film, which is called 17 Moments of Spring, with Russian colonel, Soviet colonel, who got infiltrated into the Gestapo, rised up the ranks, and was a very important spy. And Putin often associates himself with that man. And so you're not going to forbid this exhibit. I mean, so that was an incredibly clever way of saying, we do what we want. You want a Soviet theme? Here is a Soviet theme. But it's going to be a theme that goes against the state agenda. So this is just a little thing I put together. This is sort of 23 once again. The military is everywhere. You see this is all everything is very militaristic. So this is 23, 24. As I said, I went to other places, and in no place in Russia that I visited, and I probably visited about 20 cities, Tula, where they make weapons, was the most militant. Everybody else was not. So that was the most militant. And of course, once again, Russia double-think, double-speak, split personality. So you have this Z, which is the sign of the support for the war, for peace, for Russia, for president, for the army, for bravery, for truth. But you see the doves, because this is a war placard, but you see the doves. And it's kind of an interesting mixture of propaganda, but even more interesting is that peace is not the word that you're supposed to use, because in certain cases it can be used against you, because by saying you want peace, you are discrediting the Russian army. So all of this kind of, if you are not a Russian, like me, you probably would have a little bit of a headache and maybe slightly split personality disorder yourself. Tula is also very famous for its gingerbread, so this is a gingerbread on the right down. Gingerbread is a gun. You know, it's gingerbread. It's very tasty, but it has a gun in it. But important, by 25, by now, all of this is white noise. I mean, all of this is completely as if it's not happening. So this is the American embassy in Moscow. Said Zivo, to annoy the Americans if they're still there, which is probably 2.5 Americans there, because everybody else is kicked out. But as a lot of kind of, especially European nations, they name places next to the Russian embassies, the Nemtsov Square or the Navalny Square or something, so of course the Russians do the same thing. This is from Novgorod, which is the only thing that you see related to the war is this poster. One poster in many different places, but just one. And it says, victory is near, have time to become a veteran. Because they all have statistics, they all have they all need to have certain numbers of those who get recruited for money, which is another amazing thing. So one of the things that the war allowed Putin to kind of pacify the public is that ultimately there was no full mobilization. So people fight for money. You recruit them for money. You force them to sign up. People get out of prison to sign up. So once again, these are soldiers of fortune. So the Russians don't need to pay attention to them. But this is all, I mean, and this is kind of, as I put here, cynicism, trolling, patriotic showing off, satisfying state demands on recruitment in this poster all at once. So whatever part you want to take, you take. And this is a conversation I heard myself in a subway. It says, so who if not you, it says the poster. And the two boys, young men, were kind of walking by, and one said, who if not you? Well, Putin, of course. So this is kind of a laughing off all the time. Do I still have time? Am I okay? How am I doing on time?
5 more minutes.
5 more minutes? Okay.
And then Q&A.
Okay. So then... nostalgia. And all these traditional weddings, they've become very trendy in recent years because they're sort of, you stress patriotic points, you kind of get rid of stress a little bit, but also you kind of, this is also an answer to the West. We have our own. So on one hand, you live in a Western world. On the other hand, we are very traditional. So if I don't have time, there is another woman from the 80s, Nadezhda Kadышeva. She sings all this kind of traditional songs, but it's very, very familiar to me as a Soviet person when all these national, the Ukrainians and the Georgians and the whatever, they would be all this performances of national, of nationalities. So it's kind of coming back, but not as a, kind of as a, in fact, as a sort of response to propaganda. People go there like on vacation and then come back to their normal global Western life. So these are pictures from Eurovision. We're coming back to the Olympic themes of 1980s and so on. Okay. Oh, sorry. Oh. Okay, so here it is. This is just now. It really August. Wonderful. Tasty period, McDonald's, Pushkin Square. Those of you who've been know that McDonald's history is 1990, giant opening, Soviet Union opens to the world, opens to America, giant lines. I was passing by, couldn't understand on the bottom, couldn't understand what the hell is going on. What are they trying to get in the pink limousine? By the way, pink, it's going to be forbidden. And so as the girl there said, you just cannot cancel pink, which is a great line. And so then I started asking, so it turned out they're lining up for Hello Kitty with all the traditional everything. It is Hello Kitty that they're lining up for. And then I finally, a few days later, I went into McDonald's, whatever, Вкусная точка. I went in and I said, do you have those, the Russian heroes, the Ilya Muromets and whoever? And they just looked at me, they was completely crazy. Like, who's going to buy those? So it is, this is August 25, with all the laws forbidding anything that is Western, yet here it is, right there in public space. And so finally, propaganda and the discontents. This is Нет войне, no to war. This is in Peredelkino, and this trunk is being moved around. So when it is reported, it is moved somewhere there. I just saw it myself in July. This you see, so there's a soldier right now in Kursk, and it was interesting, so this guy on crutches goes like this, and the crowd goes like around him, because it's not a national war. It's a war that Putin fights elsewhere. And there are some brave moments. This is in 24 in Yaroslavl. You go to one of their main monasteries, and you see this stone that is painted in Ukrainian colors, and there's two young women standing next to me looking at this, taking pictures, and one of them says, do you think we should hide it so they would not destroy it? And I was like, no, it's been there, they probably didn't notice. And this another one in Murom, another old city, the yellow and blue balloons to promote something. So I went into the store and I kind of said, well, we have very brave balloons here. Are you sure it's okay? And the girl said, well, if somebody will come to check, I will have my Marilyn Monroe smile, and I would say, oh, these colors look so pretty together. Who is going to deny me that sense of beauty? So here it is. Thank you very much.
card to write the question, and our assistant will collect questions, give it to Professor Hansen, who will then read the questions.
That sounds good.
Meanwhile, while you're still thinking, I have one question for you. Yes, I'm exploiting my own privilege, sorry. I know you worked for George Kennan at some point in your life. And George Kennan, for those who might not know in this room, he is one of the architects of the Cold War policy and who saved us all maybe from the hot war, arguably. Since you worked for him, I was wondering what would George Kennan say about the current situation in the context of the Cold War and everything?
Thank you. Well, George Kennan wouldn't approve, and he would, don't get upset, he wouldn't approve mostly of the American handling of it. He would say, and that's what he often said to me, that containment is not appeasement. And he would say that there was very little effort made to contain. Remarkably, in my archives, in my papers, I have a note from him in 1997 when I was his research assistant. I have a note, I have a letter from him to Strobe Talbot, who at the time was Under Secretary of State for Eurasian Affairs, and Strobe Talbot's response to Kennan. And in Kennan's letter to Talbot, he basically predicted today. He said that if NATO expands, Russians are going to react a certain way, and for now there is no reason to think that Russia would stay on the course, anti-Western course. However, if NATO does expand, it's going to influence Russian thinking, it's going to influence Russian behavior, and ultimately it's going to have what it is today. And when I found this about 2 years ago, when I was changing offices, I was absolutely shocked because I forgot about that document. So George Kennan would say it wasn't containment, and containment is not appeasement, and he would say, I told you so. And he would also say that you really don't want to bait Russia.
Sorry, I've had no time to collate here, so let's see. It is very easy to be pessimistic about the state of Russia. What's one thing that gives you the most hope about the future of Russian democracy?
Well, democracy is a strong word. Let's just, in fact, everywhere. Nothing about Russian democracy, nothing makes me optimistic. However, I come from a family that is a family connected to the Kremlin, although of course I never witnessed it, but I do remember Khrushchev. And he was a big Stalinist in his youth, and then he used his power to turn away from Stalin and started a period that is called the Thaw, when in fact exchanges began possible with the United States and so on. And so every time, so I just finished the book, well, just finished, I just published last year, I published a book on Khrushchev, which I didn't plan to write at all. I went to Moscow actually to write a book on Putin and women. But I got an offer to write a book, biography of Khrushchev, which is obviously we don't need more, but anyway. So I wrote that book, and I'm very happy that I did. And after writing it and publishing it, I came with one formula, which may be too optimistic, but I still think historically it's valid. For every Stalin, there is a Khrushchev. For every Brezhnev, there is a Gorbachev. And therefore, if history chose to lead Russia, or Russia went into its own historical trap, where Putin or Putin himself led Russia into that historical trap, that is, instead of leading the country, he chose to become the father of the nation. And the father of the nation uses the nation for his own purposes rather than leading the nation for the better future. So if Putin chose that historical formula of Russia, which you have remission, oppression, like a pendulum swing. So historically, and I'm optimistic, historically, for every Stalin there is a Khrushchev.
Wonderful. So here's a question about the recent Putin-Xi meetings in Beijing at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Of course, also a commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the end of Victory Day, and although later, the end of World War II. So what was the propaganda effect of that meeting? I mean, particularly for Russians seeing it in China.
Well, I mean, Russian propaganda is propaganda. Putin is meeting with Xi. Putin is a global leader. Putin just met with Donald Trump in Alaska. He had a red carpet. Trump clapped his hands, and now he's with Xi, and they're basically telling Trump to screw off because Trump is not supportive enough, and no, let's have North Korea to add as a cherry on top, and the red carpet and the World War and so on. So it's an onslaught, but for many it's really white noise. I mean, people who watch TV die like, oh right, Putin is the West wanted to isolate, but we now on the East, but Russia is not an Eastern country. It has never been. In order to understand China, you need to be sinologist. In order to know Notre Dame, every person in the street would tell you what Notre Dame is. And therefore, it's really fighting its own kind of this chicken head, the double ego all the time. And so the propaganda was there. But also, there is a lot of other information that people who wanted to, and a lot of people do go online to find things, although of course the state makes it almost impossible because everything is banned. YouTube is banned, well, it's not banned, it's slowed down, banned. Signal, WhatsApp, something, but VPN, you can use VPN. I mean, it's harder, but you still can do it. And anybody who knows anything, and even on Russian TV, they would say, well, it's great, Xi and Putin look fantastic together. However, in our history, that is Russian history with China, these things never last long. And somebody would always remember that and remind that. And I'm sure the Kremlin itself pushing, oh, we've never been so friendly, everything is so wonderful. The reason they push it so much is also because they know that any moment Xi can become Mao Zedong and would say, you know what? I'm not interested. I have other more important invitations.
So there are a couple of questions about the economy, and of course the images from the photos are pretty lively, and people seem to be doing well. But lately the reports are that inflation is up, and oil refineries have been attacked by the Ukrainians. There's discontent about the way the economy is moving for the year. So is that likely to just shake up the complacency, or is there even some possibility of revolution or rebellion from below as the economy worsens?
I wouldn't expect any revolution from below. There's no such thing, just because everything else is there's so much restriction that, and I think that's why it's being done, is because if something happens, then restrictions are jumping into the point of no return right away. But yes, economy is you still wouldn't see it in the street. I mean, you still wouldn't see it in the store. But if you do go to the store, the choice is much less than it used to be. For example, when I go, or you don't go actually, it's an incredible service economy, which is another kind of one of those Russian contradictions, is because usually the idea was that service economy is a sign of a decent democracy. So Russia was able to create an amazing service economy that Austria would be jealous of. And yet, there's no democracy. So you can just press the button and everything comes. I mean, I who live in New York, I'm always jealous of what Moscow can do, or St. Petersburg can do, or even Nizhny Novgorod can do, for that matter. So the choice is less, it's less visible, but the prices are there. And I think, when I was there in August, the refineries only started being hit, but now there are longer lines. The gasoline is not available in many places. I would imagine not a revolution, but I would imagine even more screwing from the top. any kind of any freedom that is remaining, basically nailing it into the coffin, just in case. And those once again who follow closely Russian politics, to Trump's fascinating speech at the United Nations. I was thinking about Khrushchev's performance in 1960 at the United Nations.
Trump didn't take off his shoes.
Well, Khrushchev didn't either, by the way. So that's a myth. But nonetheless, it's a good myth. He didn't, so Dmitry Peskov, the spokesman for the Kremlin, he immediately gave an interview discussing that, yes, we're at war, because normally you're not supposed to say that it's a war because it's special military operation, God forbid. But we're at war. In crisis, there's a lot of inflation. In crisis, you have to tight your belts and so on. So the country is already preparing for more discontent. Because before they would apologize for if Ukrainian drones would shoot in the Russian airports, they would apologize. They're no longer apologizing. It's like, well, at war, we're supposed to do this, we're supposed to do this. So I would imagine if the war doesn't stop soon enough, they will have to rename it into the war and actually have the full war going.
So a question about the children from Ukraine who've been abducted, and how does that play out in Russian propaganda today? So is it actually promoted? Do Russians hear it and think there are actually sort of, some poor Ukrainian or Russian children who've been properly brought to Russia? So what's your take on it?
It was a bigger story at the beginning. It's a less story now. I think what's kind of allowing the state to say we're only saving these children, we're not stealing them and whatnot, is that in one of those renewed negotiations, renewed meetings in February and March, I think the Ukrainian side gave the names of 300 and something. And so, of course, the Russians are saying, well, if only 300, why are you saying that 10 and 20 or whatever, how many thousand? So that's, and that is always important, and especially sort of the Ukrainian side, the Western side, European side, when you deal with such seasoned propaganda state like Russia, you really have to be very precise in what you're arguing, because the minute you become discombobulated, they immediately season it and start using it. So that's a story that allowed kind of the bit of a disconnect between the numbers given and the numbers and the names given to be deported back from Russia already creates a propaganda heaven. But also with the military tribunal, not military tribunal, I'm sorry, the International Criminal Court, International Criminal Court, that's another discombobulation. And so once again, Putin looks at it and is like, really, that's what you have at me? Like I am, and you all cheered for me to become to be sanctioned by to be investigated by the criminal court, and yet you yourself don't want to do it with Benjamin Netanyahu, and now the whole International Criminal Court is going to be sanctioned by the United States. So once again, when you think about Russia, not that you do, or maybe you do, you always have to think about how hypocritical story around Russia also is. And once it's hypocritical, it helps Russia tremendously to get away with its own argument, which is not, and that's actually what George Kennan argument would be. It's like, well, figure it out. Make sure that you all speak in the same voice and you are impeccable in your laws, in your justifications, in your numbers and everything. But they're not. And so Putin wins from it.
Question about the Russian Orthodox Church and its complicit relationship with the regime and imperialism. So is that working? In other words, are Russians who are devout, or even others, feeling that there is in fact some kind of symphonia, some sort of connection between religious belief and the state that's worthy of support?
I am not religious, so I really have a very difficult time answering it. And I actually think that, in my view, Russian Orthodoxy is I actually should go to prison for that. if I'm in Russia. But it's a dangerous religion, in a sense. It's a fundamentalist religion. It requires, if it goes to the very end of its belief system, it requires absolute devotion from a person. So you cannot wear it on your sleeve. It's a religion of spirit. So you have to, all your spirit has to belong. And so, of course, they use it in a very, once again, hypocritical and duplicitous manner. If you start deconstructing the messages for example, if you're so religious, and that's what Orthodoxy does. I mean, it's a militant religion. It's those of you who know, the George the Slayer, Michael the Slayer, George the Slayer. So the center of your belief system is not only the Holy Ghost, but also the killer. And so that's the Orthodox religion that is being pushed, is that we have to stand for the war and so on and so forth. That for many actually a lot of people got disappointed in this, precisely because it's supposed to be the religion of spirit, and you're supposed to have love, bring love and peace, and instead you say, yippee, let's go and fight. But everything in Russia, and this is also, I mean, all these questions important I guess you expect, or I expect when I answer them, to give a rational answer. Russia is not a rational country. It has never been. And so one of the problems with America analyzing, you know it very well, of America analyzing it, is always analyzing it if it's a rational country. It's not. So from A to B to C, it doesn't work this way. It's from A to Z to K to something else. And you always have to remember that you say one thing, you speak another thing, you imagine the third thing, and so on. And so the same thing goes on with religion. So a lot of people, but also a lot of people say we are religious just because what if you go to prison? I mean, when I passed by a church in Moscow, some guy, actually last year, not this year, jumped at me and said, like, you have to cross yourself. You're you're close to the church. Like, okay, I thought it's a free country, but I guess I have to cross myself. So it is like that. I mean, somebody decides that you have to be part of that system, and somebody, if that guy could have actually reported on me, and I could have been brought to police to answer why am I not religious. It could happen as well. But all of this, I mean, that's what I was trying to show you and present, is that this is not a monolith. This is, I mean, I call it a porous Orwell. It's a very porous Orwell, and there's on all these pores, like me going there. I mean, I've been going there for 3 years. I'm let in, I'm let out, I speak out. I speak out from there, I give interviews, and yet it's possible. It doesn't mean that one day it's not going to be, it doesn't mean I was just lucky, but you pick and choose and you decide where you can take that risk.
Do we have time for a couple more? Is that okay? Do we have to? It's 6:03, so
Let's have 2 more.
2 more, is that okay with you, Professor Khrushcheva? All right, so this is one I really like a lot because it's a methods question. For our students who can't travel there, and it relates to your last statement, what's the best way to keep track of Russian cultural change? I mean, you can no longer do field research. So what's the advice you would give?
I don't have an advice, because because whatever is there, you can't imagine if you're outside. You really cannot imagine. You cannot, for example, in the last 2 years, I haven't told anybody. I didn't tell anybody that I was going. Because if I start telling people that I'm going, I immediately, oh my God, you cannot go, da, da, da. So there is no such thing. You read Russian publications. I suggest if you're a serious reader, you read, it's called RBK, which is sort of a kind of business, but they give you the news without all this embroidery, like reading an AP story. It's without all the embroidery, but you would know what's happening. You listen to, I know that all this YouTube shows, but they also have a slant, because these are journalists and analysts who left. And so for them, they haven't been there for 4 years or for 3.5 years. So they also cannot see it the way it is. No, it's a black hole. It's almost like it was in the Soviet. I mean, you probably remember the the late Soviet days when there was still impossible to go. So you learn your Russian, you do research, but it's very unconnected to reality. I guess it is the time like that, but once again, for every Stalin there is a Khrushchev, and you're young, and he's old.
That's great. All right, so a couple questions, and I apologize to the 2 or 3 we just couldn't get to, but maybe to wrap up. There have been a few questions about what you think the end goal is of the special military operation. I mean, some people argue the war just has to go forever because of the mobilization that allows this Kremlin regime to stay in power, but others think, you know, it stops with a certain notion of where the empire's rebuilt or the Soviet Union's rebuilt. So what's your vision of the future here?
Well, I was never of a school of thought that Putin wants to rebuild the Soviet Union. I actually think it's too simplistic, and George Kennan would have disagreed. He's certainly believing in a sphere of influence, and he doesn't think he's very different from anybody else, because even when Barack Obama or Joe Biden was saying we don't have sphere of influence, please forgive me for this word bullshit, of course. I mean, America just has the whole world as a sphere of influence. And basically for Putin is that this whole idea that whatever the lion can do, the dog cannot. His argument is, I'm not your dog. So if you can do it, I can do better. I think he could have stopped in February, March, if Donald Trump, as he thought, would deliver on convincing Zelensky of kind of twisting the European arm. He would have done what he said he would have done. So the Donbass gets to Russia, and he stops in these 2 other, Zaporizhia and Kherson. He would stop where they said they would stop. But Zelensky was not for sale. Europe has invested too much of its, not even weapons, but too much of its reputation, saying that Russia could lose on the battlefield, which, by the way, is not going to happen. So that's a wet dream, absolutely. And it's interesting that Europe somehow just got into this as if they live in Hollywood. So that's not going to happen. And if it's not going to happen, Putin is going to go for until the goals of special military operation would be achieved. That is until he gets to Donbass, for the whole Donbass. And if he's asked politely, and if he's begged politely, he may stop in other places, but probably not, because he's a very vindictive guy. If you don't agree, he's going to really make sure that you suffer for it. Then the question is how long Russia can go. And that's why my feeling, and it's a very pessimistic feeling, and I apologize for this, it's just a feeling. If you analyze from George Kennan kind of point of view, is that special military operation should last for a long time, because he, with all these recruits, he cannot take this quickly. It's like 8 kilometers a day, 1 kilometer a day, so it's slow. And there is a lot of military activists, well, a lot, about 20%, don't believe there's more, it's 20%, who say, well, let's mobilize, let's do, and one day Putin would say, you know what, I'm tired. I am being too much shaken by all these Europeans. They're annoying to me. They keep telling me that I'm going to invade them. By the way, Putin never wanted a European war. He never wanted a NATO war. But by now, everybody seems to assume that we're going to have that. It's like, okay, you know what? You convinced me. I'm going to do that. And by the way, if I don't win, or if I start losing, I have a nuclear bomb to fall upon. So I am quite pessimistic. I think he's going to fight for as long as he can, and he's not going to lose. He may not win, but he's not going to lose, whatever that means. So there's really not good outcome. But when I was in Moscow, not this year, because this year is much more pessimistic and much more fear. Actually, it was interesting because at the beginning, when I got in May, it was a lot of fear. And in July, when there's more and more restrictions happen, there was a lot of fear. But by August, suddenly, the fear became so ridiculous and restrictions became so insane that people said, the more you're pushing the war on me, the less I'm believing in it. So and that's why potential for war is difficult, because the society is not there. But at the same time, the society wasn't there in 22, and yet what happened? So I actually don't have an answer. It's like one of those Russian novels which actually does not have an ending, and you're lucky if it doesn't have an ending, because if it does have an ending, it's going to be a bad one. Thank
Very good.
you.
I'm going to pass it back to Professor Hokra for some final words. Thank you very much.
Let's thank our speakers. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Julien, for this amazing talk. If you have a few questions, maybe you can come up and ask. If you have additional questions, then thank you again for coming. Look out for our next events. I think we will have on October 14th in the recital hall a concert of Ukrainian music. We're inviting Ukrainian musicians, and it will be at 5 p.m. October 14th in the recital hall in the music building. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nina, thank you so much.
Thank you.